The morning sun had barely broken the horizon when Emma Lawson arrived at Gate 22B of Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. She clutched her phone in one hand and a steaming cup of coffee in the other, her leather carry-on rolling quietly behind her. Today, she would finally fly to Boston for her dream job interview, a position she'd worked years to secure. The terminal buzzed with the muted hum of travelers. Duty-free fragrances mingled with the sweet aroma of freshly baked pastries. Emma's heart thrummed in her chest like a hummingbird's wings, equal parts excitement and nervousness propelling her forward. At the boarding call, she handed her ticket and passport to the attendant, whose cheery, "Have a great flight," lingered in Emma's ears as she stepped onto the jet bridge. The aircraft, an aging but meticulously maintained narrow body, looked ordinary enough. Yet as she settled into seat 14C, wedged between a silent businessman and a mother soothing her toddler, Emma couldn't shake a quiet tingle of anticipation. She slipped her phone into airplane mode and placed it gently in her lap, ready to chronicle the journey ahead. The engines roared to life and the cabin trembled with their power. Emma stared out the oval window as the world below shrank away. The sprawling airport, the patchwork fields, the snaking Mississippi River. It felt cinematic, like she was starring in the opening scene of her own life. In that moment, nothing could go wrong. Climbing to cruising altitude, the seatbelt light flickered off and a hush settled over the cabin. Emma exhaled, her phone, now secure, beckoning her to capture the clouds. She lifted it, framing the cottony expanse outside, when suddenly the aircraft shuddered. A deep, resonant vibration jolted through the fuselage, rattling overhead bins and sending a collective murmur through passengers. At first, Emma chalked it up to turbulence, the kind you find in every flight. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrests. The cabin lights flickered, the plane dipped, then bucked violently as if seized in a giant's hand. Gasps erupted around her. The toddler's cry pierced the tension. The businessman's stoic posture crumpled as he exchanged panicked looks with his neighbor. Instinctively, Emma reached for her phone. She flicked it out of airplane mode and tapped record. The red dot pulsed in the corner of the screen. Her voice trembled as she whispered to herself, "Okay, Emma, it's just turbulence." Yet deep down she sensed it was something far worse. The wings, gleaming silver in the cabin lighting, flexed ominously. Seconds stretched into an eternity. With every jolt, her stomach lurched, her knuckles dug into the fabric of her seat. She raised her phone to capture the shaking overhead bins and flickering lights. In the background, the flight attendants' practiced calm cracked as they struggled to reach their jump seats. Emma's pulse raced, her breaths were shallow, quicksilver in intensity. Then came the moment that seared itself into Emma's memory. The aircraft tilted to the left, the floor angling under her. Floating coffee spilled across the aisle. Coats and magazines slid across the plastic tray tables. Emma's gaze darted back to her phone, still recording. Without thinking, she lifted her trembling voice, her words raw and desperate. "I love you." The message wasn't for the passengers around her. It was for her family, stored deep in her heart and immortalized on that tiny screen. A deafening roar filled the cabin, metal groaning against metal. The fuselage shivered violently, and Emma felt weightless, like a child on the tallest roller coaster drop. The phone slipped from her grip, sliding beneath the seat in front of her, camera still pointing at the trembling ceiling. She reached for it, fingers brushing its cool surface, as the plane lurched once more. In that instant, Emma's world tilted into darkness. When Emma Lawson awoke, her senses were shredded by a cacophony of alarms and distant cries. A thin sliver of daylight pierced a twisted shard of window beside her, illuminating the chaotic scene around her. The cabin overhead had collapsed, exposing jagged ribbing of the fuselage and letting in a bitter wind that tasted of burning fuel. The seats were splintered and strewn like broken toys. Tangled belts and fragments of luggage littered the aisle. A fractured overhead bin lay at a grotesque angle above her, its contents, books, electronics, spilling across the floor. Pain lanced through Emma's left thigh, a white-hot flash that left her gasping. She tried to sit up, but her torso bumped against the seat back ahead. Her arm was pinned, wrist trapped in mangled metal. Panic clawed at her chest as she realized the fragility of her situation. Beyond the window, shredded clouds drifted over a landscape that looked impossibly small. Patchwork farmland, interrupted by dense swathes of forest, like a model village laid out beneath glass. A voice, hoarse, urgent, cried out from down the aisle. "Can anyone hear me? I need help here." Emma turned her head toward the sound. A young flight attendant, her uniform torn, was leaning over a collapsed passenger seat. Blood stained the attendant's temple, mixing with sweat that ran down her face. Emma's instincts snapped into place. If she lay here immobilized, she might bleed out before help arrived. She anchored her feet against the bulkhead and twisted her torso, gritting her teeth against the pain. She managed to free her left arm from the wreckage, her fingers slick with oil and something darker. The flight attendant reached back, her eyes wide with relief. "Thank you," she rasped, pressing a gloved hand to her own wound. "We need to get everyone out." Emma's world narrowed to the rise and fall of her own breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, still miraculously intact though cracked, and flicked on the flashlight function. Its beam cut through the dim haze, revealing survivors scattered along the aisle. Some moaned, their faces ashen. Others lay silent, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. The injured attendant pointed toward the front of the cabin. "We need to clear the path to the emergency exit. Can you help me move this row?" Emma nodded, swallowing bile. With trembling strength, she grasped the metal frame of the collapsed seats. Together, she and the attendant heaved and wrenched, sweat stinging their eyes as wood splintered and aluminum groaned. The makeshift barrier shifted enough to create a narrow channel. In the distance, the aircraft groaned ominously. Every creak sent a fresh wave of vertigo through Emma's skull. The attendant shouted, "Keep moving! We've got a fire near the wing!" She pointed out the window. A thin plume of black smoke unfurled from the right engine, licking toward the wing surface. If that fire spread, the entire fuselage might ignite. Emma's fingers brushed against something cold and smooth beneath the seat before her. She paused and yanked, revealing her phone. It had fallen facing down, the screen cracked, but still lit with the soft glow of the flashlight. She swallowed a sob of relief. It was her lifeline, not only to her family's last "I love you," but to the world beyond this twisting metal tomb. "Let's go," the attendant barked. Emma dropped the seat fragment and limped forward, one arm slung around the young woman's shoulders. The plane pitched, throwing them against a wall of seats. Emma gritted her teeth, pain radiating through her injuries, but she dared not collapse. Behind her, muffled screams turned to screams of terror as another section of the cabin shifted, small things, luggage, personal items, tumbling down the aisle. They reached the exit row. The emergency hatch lay across a pile of debris. Emma took a deep breath, raised her phone's flashlight, and guided the attendant's hands as they pried the hatch handle free. With a wet, grinding sound, the door tore open to reveal the sky and the ground, rushing up at an obscene angle. Below lay a muddy field dotted with dark puddles of fuel. Trees stood like silent sentinels around its perimeter. Sunlight glinted off their leaves, a deceptive promise of safety. Emma peered down, her stomach twisting. Then she turned her gaze back to the cabin. Survivors waited on the other side of the open hatch, eyes wide and terrified. "Help is coming!" Emma shouted, voice cracking. "Keep moving toward the exit." She reached out to pull the next passenger forward, a middle-aged man whose shirt was soaked in blood. As he stumbled toward the opening, Emma felt the first real tremor of relief. They were getting out. With every person who crawled through the hatch, Emma's hope solidified. Then the engine fire flared brighter, the acrid scent of smoke rushing in behind them. The plane shuddered violently, as though in agonized protest. and a wall of heat burst through the opening. Emma shoved the attendant forward and fell backward inside, shielding her eyes as flames licked the doorway. She scrambled to her knees, chest tight with urgency. In that moment, everything else fell away. There was only escape, survival, the flat expanse below. Emma pressed her phone to record the chaos one final time, her flashlight bobbing in the dim cabin light, and shouted, "I love you!" before she forced herself to stand and join the exodus toward the blazing exit. Emma forced her feet forward through the haze of smoke and dust, the dull roar of the engine fire echoing like thunder in her ears. Below, the muddy field was alive with commotion, figures crawling toward the wreck, emergency vehicles racing across the grass, firefighters striding in heavy gear. The crisp morning air, once so serene, now burned with the acrid sting of jet fuel. Every inhalation felt like shards of glass in her lungs. She emerged from the fuselage onto a tangle of debris, ash drifting like snowflakes around her. Her legs trembled as she surveyed the scene. Passengers huddled together, some cradling the wounded, others sobbing with relief. The flight attendant she'd helped leaned against the plane's charred shell, pressing a makeshift bandage to her temple, eyes glassy with shock and exhaustion. Emma's heart clenched at the sight. This woman, so young and brave, risking everything for strangers. "I'm okay," the attendant rasped when Emma reached her side. "Thank you." Emma gave a weak nod, scanning for other survivors. A volunteer medic beckoned her over, voice firm but kind. "You're injured," he said, eyeing the dried blood on her thigh. "Let us help you." Emma wavered, but allowed him to guide her to a triage area set up beneath a cluster of pine trees at the field's edge. As the medic examined her wounds, Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She retrieved it with trembling fingers. Unread messages from her parents, her best friend, her fiancé, all frantic, pleading for news. Tears blurred her vision as she tapped, "I'm alive," and then watched each notification ping in confirmation. It was her first real connection to the world beyond this nightmare. A paramedic gently cleaned the gash in her thigh, placing a sterile dressing over it. The sting made her gasp. A young firefighter hovered nearby, offering water in a paper cup. Emma accepted it, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. Through it all, her mind replayed the last moments in the cabin, the way the fuselage groaned, the raw terror in her own voice as she whispered, "I love you." That recording, she realized, had become her testament. She opened the phone's gallery and found the short clip. The tiny red dot in the corner glowed mockingly innocent. Without hesitation, Emma tapped share, sending it to her fiancé, her family, her best friend. They needed to hear it, need to know she fought until the very end to save others. Now, on the muddy ground, she closed her eyes, letting the gravity of survival wash over her. Around her, the rescue operation was in full swing. Stretchers emerged from the wreckage. Firefighters carried passengers away from the burning wing, and local residents, drawn by the commotion, stood at the perimeter, faces etched with concern. A news helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight slicing through the smoke. Emma tried to shrink from its gaze, but a reporter's voice crackled through a nearby megaphone. "Survivors, if you can hear us, please remain in the clear area for evacuation." The booming announcement reminded Emma of where she was. No longer high above the clouds, but in the heart of a disaster that would shape countless lives. Hours passed in a blur of blood. Rain, an afternoon shower had begun, and the relentless drone of machinery. Emma drifted between consciousness and shock, cocooned in a foil blanket beneath that cluster of pines. Every distant siren, every shouted instruction reverberated inside her skull. Occasionally, she would squeeze her phone, checking for new messages of love and relief. By late afternoon, the fire was finally contained. The blackened wing lay still, a towering monument to what had been. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the field, Emma felt a shift in the air, a gentle benediction after the storm. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you," to the sky. When she next opened them, a uniformed officer knelt at her side, clipboard in hand. "Miss Lawson?" he asked softly. "We'd like to get your statement." Emma nodded, voice hoarse. She told him everything. The rattling that first tipped her off, the flight attendant's bravery, the crack in the window frame, and her final dash through the burning exit. Each word felt cathartic, a piece of the puzzle that investigators would use to understand how the plane failed, and how, against all odds, so many had lived. As twilight settled, Emma was escorted to a waiting ambulance. The stretcher tipped slightly as she climbed aboard, and she placed her hand over her phone, now dark and silent. She thought of her family, no longer consumed by fear, but buoyed by hope. She thought of the passengers who hadn't made it, their faces lingering in her mind like ghosts she would carry forever. The ambulance door closed. Emma drew a shaky breath as the vehicle pulled away from the wreckage, siren wailing softly. Ahead lay recovery, investigation, and a lifetime of memories. Behind her lay the field, strewn with fragments of a day that would live on in history. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital felt harsh against Emma's tired eyes as she awakened to the steady beeping of a heart monitor. She lay on a narrow gurney in the corner of the trauma ward, cocooned in crisp white sheets. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the soft hum of medical equipment replaced the roaring engines and acrid smoke she'd left behind. Pain radiated from her left thigh and arm, a dull throb that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. As the fog of sedation lifted, memories of the crash surged back, metal twisting, flames licking the exit, the frantic scramble through the wreckage, and she squeezed her eyes shut as if to force them back into oblivion. A gentle hand on her shoulder made her open her eyes. It was Dr. Nguyen, the hospital's lead trauma surgeon, her face kind but lined with exhaustion. "Good morning, Emma," she said softly. "You're in stable condition. You sustained a compound fracture in your left femur and several deep lacerations in your arm, but the surgeries went well. Your bleeding has stopped, and we've started physical therapy consultations. How are you feeling?" Emma's throat felt dry, but she managed a whisper. "Tired. Grateful." She looked down at the casts and bandages. "Will I walk again?" Dr. Nguyen smiled gently. "Yes. It'll take time and work, but you're young and strong. Your body wants to heal." Outside the curtain, the murmur of activity continued. Nurses tending to other patients, an orderly wheeling supplies, footsteps echoing down the hall. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the steady rhythm soothe her trembling heart. Alone again, she reached for the small table beside her bed. Her phone lay there, the screen dark, but she knew it was full of messages and missed calls. Summoning the strength, she tapped it to life. Floods of notifications greeted her. Dozens of voicemails from her fiancé, texts from co-workers, messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in years, all expressing relief, love, and concern. She scrolled through one after another, tears slipping unbidden down her cheeks. Someone had even started a crowdfunding page for her medical expenses. She felt a mix of gratitude and guilt, survivor's guilt, knowing that dozens of fellow passengers had not been so lucky. A knock at the curtain drew her attention. 2 hospital social workers entered, carrying folders and a tablet computer. "Hi, Emma," one said gently. "We're here to help coordinate your care and give you some time to process everything. We also have news requests and a few questions about your experience." The thought of talking to reporters made her chest tighten. She glanced at the tablet screen displaying logos of local news networks and national channels. The social worker continued, "Of course, you don't have to speak if you're not ready. Your health comes first." Emma nodded, grateful for the option. She realized that outside these walls, the world was replaying her terror on countless screens and feeds. She wasn't sure she was ready to relive it in front of strangers. Later that afternoon, physical therapist Marcus Alvarez wheeled in with a gentle smile. He introduced himself and helped Emma sit up on the edge of the bed. Her legs trembled, but he supported her weight as she swung her legs over the side. The weight-bearing boots he strapped onto her feet felt foreign, little steps. he encouraged. Just lift your foot. Place it down gently. Breathe. Emma inhaled deeply. She lifted her right leg first, setting her foot carefully on the floor. A flash of pain shot through her thigh, but she held steady. Then the left leg, weaker still but obedient. She stood, hands gripping the mattress edge, humming with effort. Marcus's calm presence steadied her. After a few more shaky steps, Emma felt a surge of quiet triumph. She allowed herself a small, breathless smile. When the session ended, Marcus guided her back onto the bed and left her with an exercise plan. As the door closed, Emma realized recovery would be a marathon, not a sprint. But she had crossed the worst threshold. She had survived the crash, and now each wobbling step was proof of her will to live. As evening fell, the hospital room's curtains were drawn against the dying light. Emma lay back, exhaustion settling into her bones. She replayed the smallest details of the crash and rescue, how the flight attendant had bled beside her, how the engine's roar had become a roar in her mind, how every face she'd helped escape haunted her dreams. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart's steady beat. She was alive. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, Emma opened the hospital-provided tablet and logged onto the online survivors support group that the social workers had arranged. On the screen appeared the names of fellow crash survivors, David, Angela, Marcus, people whose lives had intersected with hers for just a few harrowing minutes, but whose bonds would last a lifetime. There were messages of encouragement and shared fears, stories of nightmares and flashbacks, and plans to attend group therapy together in the coming days. Emma typed a tentative "hello" and paused. Then she wrote, "We made it, one step at a time." Her message was met with a flurry of responses. Hearts, emojis, words of solidarity. Emma closed her eyes, letting their virtual embrace calm her restless mind. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but she was not alone. Before drifting to sleep, Emma retrieved her phone one last time and played back the recording of her whispered, "I love you." The sound of her own voice, fragile and unwavering, echoed in the quiet room. She realized that the true testament of survival was not just enduring the crash, but living beyond it, carrying hope into every breath, every step, every shared moment. As sleep claimed her, Emma dreamed of blue skies and open fields, scenes of freedom and possibility. In the morning, she would face physical therapy, interviews, and perhaps the burden of telling her story to the world. But for now, she slept, cradled by the promise of recovery and the unbreakable foundation of human compassion. Sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, painting thin stripes across Emma's bed. Her body ached with the lingering pain of yesterday's therapy session, muscles strained in unfamiliar ways. Yet it was the silence in her mind that felt most oppressive. The images of the crash haunted her, disjointed flashes of twisted metal, the attendant's wide-eyed fear, the roar of fire. She felt as though her thoughts were trapped in a loop, replaying moments she couldn't escape. By mid-morning, Emma was back in the physical therapy room. Marcus greeted her with a gentle nod. "How's your pain today?" he asked. Emma shrugged, glancing at the resistance bands and balance board waiting for her. He guided her through stretches, focusing on her hip and shoulder. "Remember," he said, "your body remembers trauma differently than your mind. Both need time. It's okay to feel anxious." Emma forced a small smile and nodded. She knew the exercises were crucial, but each movement felt like reopening a wound. She gritted her teeth through the final set and managed to stand tall once more. Marcus handed her a towel and offered words of praise. "You're making progress." Those words grounded her, reminding her that each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. That afternoon, the hospital's psychologist, Dr. Miriam Clark, came for Emma's first mental health session. Emma settled into an armchair in a sunlit corner of the therapy suite. The scent of lavender in the air meant to calm. Dr. Clark sat across from her, a notebook open. "Surviving an event like this can leave emotional wounds," Dr. Clark began softly. It's normal to experience flashbacks, guilt, even anger. You're safe here. Emma swallowed. I can't stop hearing the engine. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in the cabin. Her voice trembled. And sometimes, I wonder why I lived when others didn't. Dr. Clark nodded thoughtfully. Survivor's guilt is very common. Let's acknowledge those feelings, then work to find meaning in your survival. You survived for a reason. Perhaps to tell your story, to support others. We'll explore coping strategies together. They talk strategy, grounding exercises, breathing techniques, and the importance of expressing her emotions instead of suppressing them. Emma tried a deep breathing exercise, inhaling count of 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. As she focused on her breath, the tight knot in her chest loosened just a fraction. Later, back in her room, Emma reflected on the sessions. Physical recovery was tangible, broken bones mending, muscles strengthening. But the mental scars would require patient care and compassion. She resolved to honor the lives lost by embracing each day, speaking openly of her fears, and seeking help whenever needed. That evening, her fiancé, Alex, visited. He entered quietly, carrying a bouquet of daisies, bright and hopeful. Emma's eyes filled with tears as he sat beside her, taking her hand. "I've replayed your message 1,000 times," Alex said softly. "I love you. I'm here." Emma leaned into him, tears spilling. They spoke of the future, the moment she would return home, the simple joys awaiting, cooking dinner together, watching a movie, walking in the park. These plans felt like lifelines, threads pulling her out of the darkness. As Alex left, Emma settled into bed, clutching her phone. She sent a group message to the survivors' support group. "Physically stronger today, emotionally still healing. How do you cope with the flashbacks?" Responses poured in. Journaling, meditation, creative expression. One survivor shared a sketch of the wing silhouette against the sky. Another, a poem of hope. Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of shared understanding. Before sleep, she opened a blank note on her phone and began to write, "I am more than a statistic. I am here to live, to love, to remember, and to rebuild." She paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, then added, "Chapter 5, in memory of those we lost." Emma set the phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would continue therapy and perhaps draft the next chapter of her recovery, both the physical and emotional. The journey ahead was long, but with each breath, each movement, each word, she reclaimed a piece of herself. Morning light filtered softly through the blinds of Emma's hospital room, but today held a sweetness that all the sterile walls and beeping machines could not diminish. After 2 grueling weeks of surgeries, therapy sessions, and emotional counseling, Emma had been cleared for discharge. The day she had dreaded and yet secretly longed for had finally arrived. She would leave Mercy General Hospital and return to the world she had almost lost. Her fiancé, Alex, arrived early, a battered duffel bag in hand and relief shining in his eyes. Nurses bustled around, finalizing paperwork and providing home care instructions. Emma wheeled her belongings to the door, pausing to thank each staff member by name. Dr. Nguyen offered a proud smile. "You've earned this, Emma. Remember your exercises and take it slow." Dr. Clark pressed a supportive pamphlet into Emma's hand. "Keep up with therapy and reach out if the memories overwhelm you." Their kindness wrapped around her like a warm embrace. Outside, a wheelchair awaited. Alex helped Emma settle into it, her casts and crutches neatly packed in the back. As the elevator doors slid open, the scent of fresh air, tinged with late spring blossoms, washed over her. Tears pricked her eyes as the automatic doors to the hospital lobby opened onto the parking lot. She peered around, half expecting to see the burned-out fuselage or the muddy field, but there was only a row of sedans and the hum of city life. Their car ride home was filled with tentative conversation. Emma's triumphs in physical therapy, the small victories of being able to shower without assistance, the first solid meal she had eaten in days. The drive passed through familiar neighborhoods, rows of red brick houses with white fences, blooming magnolia trees arching over sidewalks. Each passing landmark grounded Emma further in reality. She was alive, she was safe, and the world continued to turn. Pulling into her own driveway, Emma took a shaky breath. The house looked just as she had left it. A wreath on the front door, her bicycle propped against the garage, a welcome mat dusted with pollen. Alex helped her into the entryway, where a caregiver awaited to install grab bars and a temporary ramp. The home felt quiet, almost reverent, as if it, too, was honoring the gravity of this moment. Inside, Emma settled onto her favorite sofa, its cushions worn but comforting. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, illuminating framed photographs. Emma and Alex at their favorite coffee shop, Emma graduating college, family gatherings. She reached out and brushed her fingertips across a photo of her and her parents, taken last Christmas. A wave of gratitude and sorrow washed over her. Gratitude for another chance, sorrow for the lives lost that day. Over the next few days, Emma adjusted to home life with deliberate care. Each morning began with leg lifts and stretches in the kitchen, followed by Alex reading aloud from a novel while she iced her knee. Physical therapy sessions transitioned to the living room, where Marcus guided her through balance exercises using a folding chair. Each clink of cutlery or hum of the refrigerator reminded her of the simple comfort she had once taken for granted. Yet beneath these routines lay a current of tension. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, had scheduled formal interviews with survivors, including Emma. She received notification of a hearing to gather first-hand accounts, slated for 2 weeks later in Washington, D.C. The thought of recounting the terror, of reliving every detail under sworn testimony, churned her stomach. But she understood the importance. Her words could help prevent future tragedies. On the eve of the hearing, Emma hosted a small gathering of fellow survivors in her living room, Angela, David, and Marcus among them. The support group, once confined to digital messages, was now flesh and blood. Their shared laughter, the embrace of understanding, made the pain a little more bearable. They talked of nightmares and coping techniques, of the weight of survivors' guilt and the sparks of hope nudging them forward. Angela, who had sat a few rows ahead in the cabin, recounted how she had clutched her daughter's hand and whispered a prayer. David, a stoic businessman transformed by the ordeal, spoke of the ripple effect. The colleagues he once took for granted, now treasured in every phone call and meeting. Marcus, the paramedic who had been among the first on the scene, revealed his own hidden scars, images that haunted him long after the flames were doused. Together, they practiced telling their stories aloud, Emma reading from her notes, each word carefully chosen to honor both the fallen and the living. Alex listened from the doorway, his heart full of pride and apprehension. When the session ended, the survivors pressed their hands together in solidarity, a silent vow to carry one another through the days ahead. The morning of the NTSB hearing arrived with brisk clarity. Emma dressed carefully, a tailored blazer over a soft blouse, her hair pinned back to keep stray strands from distracting her when she spoke. Alex drove her to the airport, where she boarded a small chartered flight bound for Washington. As the plane took off, Emma closed her eyes and steadied her breath, focusing on the promise of purpose beyond her fear. Seated in the hearing room, under bright lights and the solemn gaze of investigators, Emma felt the gravity of her testimony. When her turn came, she stood, steadied by the memory of her phone's recording, the fragile, unwavering "I love you" that had transcended the chaos, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, each detail painting a vivid picture: the rattling cabin, the collapsing ceiling, the heroism of strangers. With every sentence, she reclaimed her narrative, turning terror into testimony. When she finished, a hush fell over the room. Then applause, not for her as a survivor, but for the courage it took to share her truth. In that moment, Emma understood the full weight of her survival. She was not just living for herself, but for the countless souls who had perished and the future travelers who might benefit from the lessons she had learned. Exiting the hearing room, Emma felt a surge of relief and resolve. The road home had been long and winding, but each step, no matter how faltering, had led her to this purpose. As she stepped into the Washington sunshine, she inhaled deeply. She was ready for whatever came next. Emma stepped off the train at Grand Central Terminal, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the cavernous hall. The station's vaulted ceiling arched high above her, its celestial mural a pale reminder of endless skies, both the skies she had trusted and the ones that had betrayed her. She clutched her purse strap with white-knuckled determination as she navigated through the throng, each passing commuter a testament to the world, continuing on without pause. Today, she would confront an arena she had once taken for granted: the airport. She arrived at John F. Kennedy International Airport just as dawn's first light streaked the terminals in hues of lavender and gold. A crisp breeze followed her into the arrivals hall, carrying the distant scent of coffee and jet fuel. Emma paused beside an information kiosk, breathing deeply to steel herself against the swell of anxiety in her chest. Every step beyond this point would be a step into her past, a past defined by the crash, the smoke, and the harrowing scramble for the exit. Ahead lay the familiar security checkpoint, its conveyor belts, scanners, and stern officers, a stage for routine vulnerability. Emma placed her carry-on on the belt, removed her shoes, and watched as her phone, still cracked but fully functional, trundled through the X-ray machine. Her pulse thundered as she approached the metal detector, but the moment passed without incident. The buzzer stayed silent. The guard returned her belongings with a courteous nod. Emma exhaled, the first barrier overcome. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and followed the signs to her gate. Terminal 4, Flight 256 to Minneapolis. Irony tugged at her, returning to the very root of her ordeal, but Emma had insisted on this pilgrimage. Investigators, reporters, and well-meaning acquaintances had all urged her to just move on, but she needed more than distance. She needed reclamation. At the gate lounge, Emma found a window seat overlooking the tarmac. Planes of every model and color glided into position, their engines humming with latent power. She pressed her palm to the cool glass and watched a wide-body jet taxi past, picking up speed before disappearing around the bend. A wave of memory crashed in, the violent shake of the fuselage, the crackle of overhead bins ripping free, the warm flash of fuel igniting against metal. Her breath hitched, but she caught herself closing her eyes and recalling Dr. Clark's teaching, "You are not the crash, you are the survivor." Beside her, an elderly man settled into the adjacent seat, phone in hand. They exchanged polite smiles. Emma's gaze flicked warily to the plane, emblazoned with her crash's airline logo. A visceral reminder she could not ignore. The man looked up. "Afraid of flying?" he asked kindly, his voice carrying the soft lilt of someone who had flown these corridors countless times. Emma managed a small laugh. "I have reason to be." She hesitated, then chose honesty. 2 years ago, my plane had a catastrophic failure right after takeoff. I was on Flight 109. I lost friends. The man's eyes widened with sympathy. "That takes real courage to fly again," he said, tipping his head. "I hope today's journey is peaceful for you." She nodded gratefully. "Thank you." The board beeped. Flight 256. Now boarding. Emma rose, heart pounding, and joined the line. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of memory pulled at her ankles. She passed the gate agent, showed her ID and boarding pass, then stepped onto the jet bridge. The interior greeted her with the familiar scent of recycled air and upholstery wood polish, scents she once took for granted, now tinged with trepidation. Emma settled into seat 14C again, the very same row she had occupied on that fateful flight. She exhaled, closed her eyes, and drew in a slow, measured breath. Inhale, I am safe. Exhale, I am strong. She repeated this mantra like a lifeline until the engines hummed and the cabin lights dimmed for departure. As the plane rolled forward, Emma's muscles tensed, her fingers digging into the armrests. The rumble of the engines built, the nose lifting off the runway, and for a heartbeat she closed her eyes. Then she opened them to a sky awash in pale morning light. Tears blurred her vision, not of fear, but of release. The horizon stretched before her, endless and inviting. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, flipping on the camera to capture the view. With a steady hand, she recorded the smooth climb into clear blue skies. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and certain. I love you. It was the same message she had whispered in terror all those months ago, but now it carried triumph, a testament not only to love, but to survival, resilience, and renewal. Below, the clouds drifted, serene and indifferent. Above, her future awaited. Emma pressed stop recording, then tucked the phone away. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and let herself feel the gentle swell of the aircraft. This time, the wings did not flex ominously. Instead, they held her aloft, steadfast and true. When the captain's voice crackled through the overhead speaker, with nothing more daunting than a friendly welcome to enjoy your flight, Emma smiled. In that moment, she truly believed it. Landing gear retracted with a soft click, and Emma felt the subtle change in pressure as the aircraft climbed out of turbulence into smooth air. She exhaled, comforted by the familiar hum of engines at cruise altitude. As she looked out across the endless sea of clouds, her thoughts drifted to the purpose that had emerged from her survival: advocacy. She had left the NTSB hearing with a resolve not just to heal herself, but to give voice to those who could no longer speak. 3 weeks later, Emma found herself standing at a lectern in a modest auditorium at the Federal Aviation Administration headquarters in Washington, D.C. Behind her, a projection screen displayed the title of her presentation: Lessons Learned, Passenger Perspectives on Safety Failures. The room was filled with engineers, regulators, airline executives, and fellow survivors. Spotlights glowed warmly overhead, and the hush of anticipation settled around her. She began with a simple introduction: her name, Flight 109, and the date of the accident. In clear, measured tones, she walked the audience through her first-hand experience: how the first tremor rattled the cabin, how the attendants struggled to maintain calm, how passengers improvised stretchers from seat cushions, and how that whispered "I love you" on her phone had become a symbol of both terror and hope. Emma paused, letting her words sink in. A slide appeared behind her, a close-up of her cracked phone screen frozen on the red recording dot. Technology can be a lifeline in emergencies, she said, but only if it's supported by robust safety measures. She outlined detailed proposals: mandatory real-time turbulence reporting systems, reinforced overhead bins to prevent blockages near exits, and improved training for cabin crews in chaos management. Her voice remained calm, but the passion in her eyes burned bright. She recounted the moment she and the flight attendant pried open the exit hatch, their adrenaline-fueled teamwork saving dozens of lives. "We relied on courage and instinct," she said, "but we shouldn't have to. Safety protocols must account for the worst-case scenarios we live through." Questions followed, engineers probing technical feasibility, regulators asking about timeline clarifications, survivors nodding in empathy. Emma fielded each question with poise. She stressed the importance of passenger feedback in safety committee deliberations and urged airlines to establish survivor liaison programs so that, in the days after a crash, families and survivors would have a dedicated advocate to guide them through medical care, investigations, and emotional support. After the session, Emma mingled with attendees. She met Captain Reed, a veteran pilot who shook her hand firmly and promised to champion her proposals in the next safety roundtable. A young mechanical engineer approached, eyes wide. "Your presentation changed how I think about cabin design," he said. "Thank you for sharing your story. It's made the data real." That evening, Emma returned to her hotel room, exhaustion mingling with exhilaration. She opened her laptop and found dozens of emails, invitations to speak at international aviation conferences, requests from safety organizations, and messages of gratitude from other survivors who felt inspired to share their own experiences. She allowed herself a quiet smile, but as the adrenaline faded, fatigue crept in. On the desk lay her phone, the screen still bearing the faint cracks from the crash. She tapped it and played back the final seconds of her cabin recording. The strained whisper, the rattling bins, the attendant's distant cry. The sound jolted her back to that moment, raw, unfiltered. She felt the familiar ache of survivor's guilt creep in. Determined to balance advocacy with self-care, Emma scheduled a video call with Dr. Clark for the next morning. They talked about setting healthy boundaries, managing stress, and celebrating victories, even small ones like the engineer's comment. Dr. Clark reminded her that healing wasn't linear. You can push for change, but remember that you deserve care too. The following week, Emma joined a virtual roundtable hosted by an international aviation safety NGO. She listened as survivors from Europe, Asia, and Africa shared their crash experiences, each story unique yet hauntingly similar in its chaos and heroism. Emma spoke up, bridging their narratives with her own. Our voices, combined, can shape global policy. Inspired by the collaboration, Emma helped establish the Global Survivors Safety Network, a coalition dedicated to uniting crash survivors, safety experts, and policymakers from around the world. Within days, membership swelled into the hundreds. Emma drafted the charter, survivor-led workshops, annual safety symposiums, and a mentorship program pairing new survivors with seasoned advocates. She poured herself into the work, her days stretching from early morning calls with international chapters to late-night emails, drafting policy briefs. One evening, as she prepared notes for a symposium in Madrid, Emma paused and glanced at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back was both changed and unchanged, the same bright eyes tempered by resolve, the same gentle smile tinged with scars. Emma realized that her journey had transformed pain into purpose, trauma into tenacity. As she closed her laptop, she whispered softly to herself, "We are stronger together." Outside, the city lights twinkled, a reminder that every life, like every light, had value. Emma turned off the lamp and leaned back, content in the knowledge that out of tragedy, she was helping forge a safer future for all travelers. Months had passed since that early morning flight from JFK, and Emma found herself standing once more in the sleek lobby of Aerotech Innovations, a pioneering aerospace design firm based in Seattle. She adjusted the lapels of her blazer, inhaled deeply, and stepped through the glass doors, her cane tapping a determined rhythm against the polished floor. Today, she would tour their new simulation lab, where engineers were developing next-generation cabin designs intended to enhance passenger safety during extreme turbulence and unexpected stress events. A young engineer greeted her. "Emma Lawson, thank you for coming. I'm Priya Singh." Her handshake was firm. "We've been eager to show you our progress. Your feedback has been invaluable." Emma smiled. The day she first met Priya, she had been wearing a corporate suit and clutching a stack of slides. Now she wore comfortable travel clothes and carried a small recorder, ready to capture any insight. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. "I'm excited to see how your concepts might have changed since our last roundtable." Priya led her into a dimly lit chamber, the walls lined with high-resolution screens. Suspended from the ceiling was a full-scale cabin mock-up, its seats painted in crisp whites and blues. Overhead, LED panels simulated the sky outside, Emma slipped on a lightweight motion-sensing vest and headphones. She'd be the first non-engineer to experience the latest prototype. "Please take a seat in row 14C, Priya instructed with a grin. "We wanted to test the same spot for continuity." Emma settled into the seat's ergonomic cushions, firmer than standard airline foam with built-in shock absorbers. The overhead bins, reinforced with a flexible polymer, remained securely closed. Priya tapped a tablet and the cabin lights dimmed. Through the headphones, Emma heard an all-too-familiar whine of engines climbing to cruising altitude. Then the simulation began. The chamber shuddered gently at first, mere turbulence. Emma felt the subtle vibration, but noticed that the seat's stabilizers countered most of the movement, keeping her body aligned. She tapped her recorder. "So far, very smooth." "Hold on," Priya warned. The shudder intensified, seats jolting rhythmically. The video panels outside the windows showed clouds churning. Overhead bins rattled faintly. Emma braced herself, but the seat absorbed the worst of the shock. Rather than pitching violently, the cabin rocked in a controlled sway. Priya tapped her tablet again. "Now, introducing a sudden micro-burst." The lights flickered. The cabin lurched sharply to the left. Emma instinctively lunged against the armrest, but the seat's restraints tightened, snugging close to her torso and cradling her hips. Instead of a gasp of fear, she found herself surprised by how contained she felt. She raised her recorder mid-shake. "This holds me firmly, even in a hard tilt." The simulation ended, and the cabin settled. Emma removed the vest, her pulse steady. "These systems would have made a critical difference," she said, admiration in her voice. "Passengers would feel the bump, but remain safe enough to move toward exits if needed." Priya beamed. "That's our goal. Give people control during chaos." She led Emma to a nearby workstation where 3D models rotated on the screen, reconfigured aisle widths, sliding evacuation chutes rather than traditional slides, and overhead lighting that shifted color to guide disoriented passengers toward exits. As Emma explored each concept, tracing paths with her fingers, asking about materials and cost projections, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Here in this lab, tragedy was being transformed into innovation. Survivors and engineers were no longer worlds apart, but collaborators building bridges between lived experience and technical expertise. Later, walking across the rooftop terrace with a view of Elliott Bay, Emma reflected on her journey. She had arrived as a broken passenger, clinging to hope, and now stood as an advocate, shaping the future of flight safety. The irony was not lost on her. The very skies that once betrayed her now inspired her. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the message. "TEDx, Seattle wants you to speak in 3 months." A small tremor of excitement and nerves ran through her. Public speaking no longer terrified her as it once had. Instead, it felt like another platform to share the voices of survivors worldwide. That evening, seated at a quiet cafe overlooking the water, Emma drafted her TEDx proposal. She wrote about the crackling metal ceiling and the whispered "I love you" that had become her emblem of survival. She described how survivor insights had spurred engineers to reimagine cabin safety and urged the audience to see adversity not as an endpoint, but as a catalyst for change. As she typed the final words, "From survivors to scientists, let us unite in purpose and compassion," Emma felt the weight of her story balanced by the wings of potential. She shut her laptop and sipped her tea, the steam curling around her like a gentle promise. Across the bay, ferries slipped through dusky waters under the watchful gaze of the Olympic Mountains. Emma closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude for the second chance, for the bonds forged in crisis, and for the chance to soar anew, not in spite of her past, but because of it. 3 months later, Emma stood backstage at the Town Hall Theater in Seattle, heart pounding beneath her tailored blazer. The bright red TEDx Seattle letters glowed behind her, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. She held her notes in one hand and her water bottle in the other, the cool condensation soothing her trembling fingers. In the wings, a technician gave her a reassuring nod and whispered, "Your mic's on. You're up in 30 seconds." Emma took a deep breath, recalling the gentle mantra Dr. Clark had taught her. Inhale, strength. Exhale, fear. She closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of the audience's anticipation thrumming through the theater walls like distant wings. The stage lights loomed like the sun cresting over a horizon of faces. For a moment, she felt the old panic rise, the memory of the fiery exit hatch, the acrid smoke, the vivid flash of overhead bins collapsing. But this time, she held those memories not as a prisoner bound to terror, but as a survivor carrying a message. A stagehand beckoned, and Emma walked forward onto the spotlighted stage. The audience fell silent, hundreds of curious eyes fixed on her. She set her water down on the small podium and adjusted the microphone, her cane resting against the wooden riser beside her. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and resonant. A hush settled over the room. Not the fearful hush of trapped passengers, but the expectant hush of eager learners. Emma let her gaze sweep across the audience, students, engineers, safety advocates, families, and felt a swollen sense of purpose. 2 years ago, she continued, I was a passenger on Flight 109, an ordinary woman excited to start a new chapter in her life. Instead, I found myself fighting for survival when the cabin shuddered violently, overhead bins collapsed, and the fuselage threatened to tear apart around me. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. She saw nods of empathy ripple through the audience. But in the midst of fear, Emma said, a single moment of courage can transform tragedy into hope. She activated her slideshow. The first image appeared behind her, a photograph of her cracked phone screen, the red recording dot glowing like a heartbeat. This small device, she said, became my lifeline. With it, I whispered one simple phrase, I love you. Her voice shook at the memory, but she steadied herself. Those 3 words carried me and countless others through the darkness. The next slide showed a diagram of the reinforced cabin design from Aerotech's simulation lab. Emma's tone shifted from narrative to advocacy. Technology alone cannot save lives unless it's informed by the voices of those who have lived through the worst. Survivors are not just witnesses, we are partners in progress. She described the new shock-absorbing seats, the polymer-lined overhead bins, and the dynamic lighting systems designed to guide passengers calmly toward exits in emergencies. Behind the scenes, volunteers in the Global Survivors Safety Network had crowdsourced thousands of survivor accounts and suggestions. Emma highlighted real testimonials, stories of passengers using seat cushions to improvise stretchers, of flight attendants who defied protocol to help strangers, and of families knit together forever by shared adversity. These voices, she said, have shaped regulations, inspired innovations, and saved lives. The final slide displayed a world map dotted with pins, each representing a survivor-led safety initiative across 6 continents. Emma stepped away from the podium, her voice rising with conviction. Our strength lies in our unity. By breaking down the barrier between technical experts and human experience, we forge cabins that are not just vessels of travel, but sanctuaries of safety. Silence followed her closing words, a pregnant pause before the audience erupted in sustained applause. Emma allowed herself a small, triumphant smile as she turned to take a bow. In that thunderous approval, she felt the resonance of her journey. From terror to testimony, from survivor to speaker, from fear to fearless advocacy. Backstage, volunteers and friends greeted her with hugs. Priya Singh, the engineer who had guided her through the simulation lab, pressed a handwritten note into Emma's hand. Your words will change the world. Emma's eyes brimmed with tears. Tears of release, of gratitude, of hope. That night, Emma dined quietly with Alex at a nearby bistro overlooking Elliott Bay. Between bites of salmon and sips of wine, they spoke of the future, The next safety symposium in Madrid, the documentary filmmakers chronicling her journey, and the survivors in remote villages who felt their voices amplified by her platform. Each plan, each idea, felt like a thread weaving together a tapestry of resilience and progress. When she finally returned home, Emma sat at her desk, phone and laptop before her. She drafted emails to the FAA, sharing the TEDx talk link and inviting further collaboration. She updated the Global Survivors Safety Network's blog with a reflection on public speaking as a form of healing, and she opened her phone's gallery one last time, finding the early clip of her whispered, "I love you," and the later recording in smooth skies, bookends of her transformation. As Lee prepared to close her laptop, Emma paused and typed one final note to herself. "We honor the past by building the future. Let our voices guide the wings of tomorrow." She pressed send, the familiar click echoing in the quiet room. Outside, the city hummed with life under starlit skies. Emma switched off the lamp, lay back and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, sleep came unbidden and free of nightmares. In her dreams, she soared above clouds, unafraid, buoyed by the wings of change she had helped to fashion. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Emma's home office, illuminating framed photos of smiling survivors and snapshots of distant conference stages. Seated at her desk, she stared at the latest draft of her memoir, From Shattered Skies to Soaring Spirits, its pages filled with recollections of the crash, the rescue, and her transformation into an advocate. Each sentence carried the weight of memory and the hope of impact. She paused at a passage describing the moment she first pressed her phone's record button in the cabin, the way her voice cracked on, "I love you," how that simple declaration cut through panic, and how it became a symbol of human connection in the face of disaster. Emma read and reread the lines, fingers tracing the printed words. She realized that her story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every survivor who saw themselves reflected in her journey. Her phone buzzed with an incoming video call from Angela, the passenger who had clutched her daughter's hand alongside Emma as the cabin faltered. Emma answered smiling as Angela's face appeared on screen, her toddler asleep in her lap. "We're back from our first family trip since the crash," Angela began. "I wanted to thank you. Your strength gave me hope to bring my daughter here." She panned the camera to show a sunny playground. "She's swinging now, laughing, fearless." Emma's throat tightened. The sight of that small girl, safe and thriving, was testament to the work they'd done together. "I'm so proud of you," Emma whispered. "Hearing that means everything." They talked about parenting after trauma, of teaching their children that love can triumph over fear. As the call ended, Emma felt a surge of purpose. Her advocacy wasn't just for policy, but for legacies carried forward by families rebuilding their lives. Later that evening, Alex and Emma walked along their neighborhood path, the street lamps casting pools of golden light. They paused by a maple tree, its leaves rustling in the warm breeze. "Do you ever miss the old you?" Emma asked softly. "Before the crash? Before all this?" Alex took her hand. "I miss who you were in the sense that I miss Saturday mornings in pajamas and lazy coffee, but I don't miss how limited your world was. You've grown into someone who helps others feel safe. That's a gift." Emma looked up at the branches above. She thought of the countless survivors who'd shared their stories, the engineers who listened, the families who found solace in her voice. The road had been paved with pain, but it now led toward possibility. She squeezed Alex's hand. "I hope my legacy is that fear doesn't have to be an end point." He nodded. "You're already proving that." Under the starlit sky, Emma felt a quiet assurance. The horizon was vast, filled with opportunities to build safer cabins, supportive communities, and resilient hearts. Her personal journey would continue, but tonight she savored the knowledge that every chapter she wrote, on paper or in life, connected shattered fragments into a mosaic of hope. Sunrise found Emma early at the small airstrip outside her town, where a local flight club offered scenic tours. Today, she had arranged a special flight, a gentle 2-hour journey over the countryside in a sturdy, well-maintained twin-engine turboprop. It was not a commercial liner, but to Emma, each ascent into the sky was a step toward reclaiming the wonder of flight, untainted by past terror. She climbed into the co-pilot seat beside Captain Reed, the veteran pilot who had first promised to champion her safety proposals. The plane's cabin was snug, every bolt and panel meticulously cared for. Emma ran her hand over the yoke, remembering how once the plane she'd boarded had become a tomb. Now this cockpit pulsed with reassurance. The engines came to life with a smooth roar, and the propellers spun into motion. The plane taxied to the runway, and Emma felt the familiar tremor under her seat, but this time she recognized it as the promise of lift, not the prelude to disaster. Captain Reed eased the throttle forward, and the turboprop rolled down the runway, lifting into the golden morning sky. Above, the world unfurled in quilts of green and gold, farmland dotted with silos, riverbanks lined with willows, sleepy towns with red-tiled roofs. Emma pressed her forehead to the window, eyes glistening. She breathed deeply, focusing on the crisp air and the gentle vibration of the engines. The flight was serene, the kind of journey she had once dreamed of but feared to take. Reed cleared his throat. "Thought you might like to try the controls." He offered her the yoke. Emma hesitated, then gripped it, feeling the weight and the feedback through the mechanical linkages. With Reed's steady guidance, she banked the plane in a gentle turn, watching as the world below shifted in harmony. She felt a rush of pure joy, the thrill of flight restored. No tremors, no fear, just wind, wings, and wide-open possibilities. She whispered, "I love you," into the headset's mic, imagining her voice carried across the sky. It was her mantra of triumph, spoken not in terror, but in triumph. After landing, Emma stepped onto the tarmac, the morning sun warm on her face. She turned to Captain Reed, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for showing me that flight can be fearless again." He smiled. "You did all the work. I just flew the plane." That afternoon, Emma visited the local elementary school to speak to a group of fourth graders about dreams, resilience, and the science of flight safety. She showed them diagrams of reinforced cabins and asked about their hopes for the future. A shy boy raised his hand. "When I grow up, I want to be a pilot who keeps everyone safe." Emma's heart soared. "That's wonderful," she said. "And I'll be cheering for you every step of the way." As she left the school, she spotted a small handmade poster in the hallway. "Thank you, Emma, for teaching us to be brave." Tears welled in her eyes. Here in young hearts, her legacy took root. That evening, Emma and Alex hosted a celebration at their home. Survivors, engineers, family and friends gathered to mark the publication of her memoir and the anniversary of Flight 109. Laughter mingled with storytelling. Music swelled in the background, and a large cake bore the words, "Shattered skies, soaring spirits." Emma stood at the edge of the group, raising a glass of sparkling cider. Silence fell. With Alex by her side, she spoke. "To those we've lost, to the lessons we've learned, and to every person who chooses hope over fear, may our stories light the way." Glasses clinked. Hugs were exchanged, and the room warmed with shared triumph. Later, alone on their back porch, Emma and Alex watched embers drift from the backyard fire pit into the night sky. She held him close, listening to the crackle of flames and the whisper of wind through the trees. "I think we're finally home," she said softly. Alex kissed her forehead. "We are." Above them, the stars burned brightly, moments of light in the vast darkness. Emma reached out, fingertips brushing his hand, and whispered once more, "I love you." This time, it was not a plea for survival, but a confident declaration of a life reclaimed, a journey complete, and a future embraced.